Hello. So it is nearly 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock. So welcome everyone who's joining me here. Um, if this is your first time and you find it interesting, then feel free to subscribe. I have um, nearly 200 sleep meditations on my channel, plus about 10 sleep meditations which have sound effects. So 210 or so sleep meditations on my channel. If you find this interesting or helpful, feel free to give it a thumbs up. And many of you probably know the way that this works. So it's 10 o'clock now, UK time. For the first 30 minutes or so, I um, kind of chat with you, answer your questions, and generally sort of hopefully be helpful or interesting. I don't know. And then I also normally from like 10:15ish, will start getting ideas from you for that will go into the sleep meditation, and then at 10:30 I will start the sleep meditation um, and do something, create something. So the type of ideas that work are short ideas, not ideas that give the entire thing, and things that I'm likely to know. So if it's something I don't know, then it won't be in any sleep meditation because I don't know it. Like if you say to me, "Can you do a thing based on this location or something?" I probably won't know the location, so I won't end up doing it because I just don't know that location well enough. So if you, for example, liked a certain location, what you want is to suggest the bits that you like about that location, not the location itself. So, if you liked a certain area because it's wooded, you would suggest woods or something. You wouldn't suggest the location. So, hopefully, that makes sense. I'm going to try to stick to time. So, the only way I can kind of do that is to not scroll through things and not read every comment and try and respond to every comment. So, what normally happens is that I spend a lot of time overrunning because I know I haven't got to the bottom of the live chat. And so I keep on ending up um, kind of trying to read down. And by the time for every question I answer, someone else ends up asking another question. So every time I scroll down a bit, someone else has given me more to scroll through. And then I end up overrunning. So it means that I'll probably just miss big chunks of the live chat rather than kind of cover it. So I apologize if you end up missed out because of that. So hopefully everyone's okay this evening. Pepperoni, don't know what that's about. Oh, someone using my anti-grinding, I assume that's anti-grinding teeth track. And just reading what the comments are as they come up. Well, my plan is that I'm just going to leave the live chat scrolling. So if I myth, that's because I was saying miss and I read the word teeth suddenly appear on my screen. If I miss something, then I just miss it. I'm going to try not to stop the live chat because obviously that's what happens. That not I doubt that everyone literally posts at exactly the same time. But what happens is that even when, like right now, it says Samantha Cole as the last entry on my live chat, but what ends up happening is rather than it being like, oh, someone else has posted and one more sentence appears, it suddenly ends up with like 6 different bits. It's like it updates at regular intervals. And so suddenly there'll be like 6 or 8 different entries. And So whatever those entries are have bumped everything off the screen, and so I end up then scrolling back to try and find what I've been missing, and then because stuff's constantly adding on the bottom, I never get to it. So obviously, my plan is just to stick with it as it is, and if I miss things, then I miss things, rather than end up kind of overrunning. And uh, the same on the other streams. I plan on doing hour-long streams, and every one ends up 3 hours. Um, yeah, there's lots of people who I think would like to be out and about, or like off at the vets, etc., or even seeing loved ones. I think there are people that care about things like that. Um, yeah, so that kind of suggestion, Sophia, that wouldn't end up being done because it's a complete thing. So I can write down, I don't know, countryside, hill, woods, pond, and see what crops up in the story. Just writing ideas down as you're already suggesting them. Obviously, that's another thing. As long as I'm looking down, I can't read. Rainforest. Horses seem to crop up quite often in these stories. Horses. Well, either that or unicorns. It's quite common that people either seem to suggest horses or unicorns, or a donkey. I think a donkey cropped up in one recently. Fan. I have written down colour changing polar bear. Obviously, as it's been gone on about so much, it might not make it into the story. A pillow. Light. Lavender field. Or just lavender. There are some nice friendly donkeys as well. The cat parent. Orchard. Cat. I often get complaints about the fact that nearly every story of mine seems to have a cat in it. I think the people that complain could do with joining the live stream so that they could suggest something different. Because as obviously many of you in the live stream know, people spend all of their time complaining that they wish I didn't do the live streams and that I should stop doing them, but then saying that they want long stories and they want me to include all these different things in those long stories. Um, I don't think of it as a short book. Look into my eyes. Um, it's what, 80,000 words or something. Again, Ice Castle in Space with Nice Princess would get broken down into Castle, Princess, and Space. Um, Sunset. Makeup. 4 hours to read. That'd be quite quick. Amethyst. I'll probably end up in the story just saying stone or something, or gem or whatever crops up. I think ocean was already suggested. Sleeping on a jelly bean. Food always seems to end up cropping up. That's something else I get complaints about. The fact that all my stories have food in them near enough. People are always eating, and then people say, "Oh, the story makes me hungry." Yeah, I think Look Into My Eyes took me, I don't know how many months to write. It took me a very long time to write it. Being kind of, well, as I'd mentioned during one of the live streams, the first, the sort of unedited version of Look Into My Eyes was something like 130, 140,000 words long. And then I had to cut that down. Or I didn't, the editor. I said to the editor, cut out everything that would annoy someone. It has to keep my personality, but anything that you think, nope, that sounds too similar to other sentences or other chapters or paragraphs or whatever, just cut it and I trust you. And so that's kind of what I did. I let them hack it to pieces because to me, two sentences that I say can have completely different meanings. And yet to someone else, they'll say that's the same thing. That means the same thing. And so obviously it was things like that that I wanted the editor to cut out, and that's why I ended up at like 80,000 or something words long. Um, is cold coffee a suggestion or a statement? A blanket? Slippers? frogs I've already written down. I'll write down coffee then. Puppies. Well, in a story, obviously, it all depends on context. I've had coffee in many of my stories with people sitting, like, for example, the time traveling fashion one, where the woman sits in the cafe. There's coffee, obviously, in that one. So there's quite a few where there's the one where the woman's sitting and having a coffee um, and then goes into a reverie in a cafe looking out over a street. Um, yeah, there's nothing wrong with cold gravy either. It's really weird, this idea that somehow something's wrong with something just because it's cold. Um, yeah, although hot chocolate could end up being full of sugar, which is going to keep you awake as well, technically. Um, yeah, people drink iced coffee, a gigantic straw. Yeah, but then you just eat the jelly with a spoon. I don't really kind of. Obviously, to me, food is just something you force into yourself because you have to eat to give yourself the energy to live. It's not something for literally any other purpose. So it doesn't really matter whether it's hot or cold. Um, my cooking when I was single would be I'm bored of waiting for it to cook now. This is how I'm eating it. And I wouldn't care what it was I was cooking. And I wouldn't care if I got ill from it or anything. It would literally, which I never did, fortunately, but it'd always be a case of I'm sick and tired of waiting. Cooking's a horrible experience. Sick and tired of waiting for it to cook. So I'm eating it right now, however it is. And then that's how I'd eat it, whether it's like, still nearly raw chicken or um, whatever it happens to be. You just eat it there and then because you're sick and tired of having to go through the process of cooking. Um, People do eat jam sandwiches. Again, I don't really understand the purpose of bread other than holding your food in place. So I would rather just have a spoon and the jar of jam. If someone's a very, very fast reader, they might read it in 4 hours. Yeah, I know, going to bed 12 minutes before the story starts. Ladybirds. No, because they're not read as night stories. They're just read as normal stories. Um, and there'll be people who would be interested in the chat afterwards about stuff. Not many people, but there will be some people who'd be interested in whatever the chat bit is afterwards. Dandelions. Yeah, Weeping Willow did. It rained. I think. I can't remember. The one that goes live on Wednesday has obviously the smell of rain, but I can't remember last week's one. Cream, if I can read my handwriting. Well, it would get confusing having it all on there multiple times. So, um, what I can do is obviously, which I wouldn't do, is edit out the end bit, and then when you press resave, you're saving it as a file with just the beginning bit, so just the story and not the chat afterwards. But as I say, it's not told like a bedtime story, and it wasn't sort of read with any intention for bedtime. So it's not read kind of in a bedtime way at all. Strawberries. We had strawberries and cream in one the other week. I can't remember which story it was. And somebody gave strawberries to the person at the end, I think. Well, I'm not yawning because I've spent hours drinking lots of coffee, and I'm normally more awake at this time than I am earlier on. Foot trial? What's a foot trial? I know what feet are. Incredibly rarely. If perhaps I'm up till like 4 o'clock or something, 3 or 4 o'clock, and then um, I obviously wake up at like 7 a.m. or something, then occasionally I might end up feeling a bit sleepy at some point, and then might kind of snooze. Feet crop up in many of my stories, talking about walking on things and walking through things, etc., and barefooting uh, on grass and stuff like that. I don't understand toe rings. That just totally confuses me why someone would even have one. It's another one of those things that doesn't seem to serve a purpose. Yeah, foxes crop up very frequently in my stories. They seem to be suggested reasonably commonly, but then I never know if they've been suggested or if someone is literally just making a post saying fox. Puzzles? And walking on sand as well. That's another common one. Broken down car. I'll just put car. The one that goes live on Wednesday has a car in it. It took me, I think, 35 minutes into editing it to realize what story I was editing, and that I was editing the one that almost made me cry. And people have suggested white fox quite often, so that's made it into my stories reasonably frequently. A hike. That normally just comes as part of any of the story. Lavender has been suggested. Cycling. 3 minutes. A swing. I'm trying to think if that was in the story I've edited. It was in one of the recent stories. The swing on the tree. Technically, nearly every story I ever tell involves hiking, so that's bound to be in there anyway. Yes, we have that phrase. That's normally when I then just walk and keep walking. We probably are up to 50 suggestions. Cuckoos, that'd be a fun one. I'm also always thinking, I wonder how people will like this when the sound effects version comes out. Like the carving wood. I bet that would really annoy people. Soothing music. I'll just put music. What's a mini chandelier? A saxophone. Yeah, I know, it's 10:29. Right, it's 10:30, so I'm stopping there. Any other suggestions that come in will get ignored. There's bound to be some. There's nearly always after I start, and while I'm talking, people will start suggesting things. So let's see. Find where I can put things down. Let's just see that I can read my handwriting. I can move that back a bit. Right. One last sip. Everything's recording. So, just take a moment to allow your eyes to close and allow yourself to begin to relax. And as you begin to comfortably drift asleep, I'm just going to tell this sleep meditation in the background. And I don't know whether you'll find yourself drifting deeper to the sound of my voice or perhaps to the spaces between my words. And as you begin to drift comfortably asleep, you can have a sense of walking through a forest. And you're walking through a forest high up in the Arctic Circle. And while you walk, you're sheltered from the wind. You're wrapped up warm and cozy. And you can hear the sound of the wind. You can hear the rustling of the branches of the trees. Noticing some snow occasionally falling down from those branches as they move. The crunching sound of each footstep. And you're walking, trying to find a clearing, somewhere that you can see the northern lights. And you can feel your warm breath with each out breath you take. And you push on through this forest, noticing how white the forest is. Noticing it's almost like a black and white photo, with just the occasional glint of green from the trees. And as you continue to push through the forest, so you can begin to notice some sparkling moonlight off in the distance, noticing that you're gradually approaching a clearing. And then as you arrive at that clearing and walk out into that clearing, you gaze up and see the most beautiful dancing colours in the sky. And you watch those colours as they move and dance. And you sit down on the snow, crunching down onto that snow, just watching and enjoying the light show overhead. You set up a camera. You take some photos of the dancing, moving lights in the sky. And after taking some photos, you continue to just sit and relax, noticing the way the moonlight seems to give a slight blue tinge to the surface of the snow. And then as you gaze out towards some snowy hills, you notice that there's a polar bear and a polar bear cub walking up and over one of those hills, illuminated by the gentle light of the moon. And you see that adult polar bear slide slightly in the snow while walking along that hill. And then walking to the peak of the hill. And then you notice the strangest thing. That the polar bear seems to sit down in the snow. The cub sits down in the snow. And then that light show in the sky begins to change. The lights begin to fill more of the sky, almost like they're lowering down to the ground. The light becomes more intense and appears more energetic. And while watching that, you notice that it looks like the light is coming down towards that polar bear. And you pick up your camera, zoom in on the polar bear to get a closer look. And while zoomed in on the polar bear, you notice its fur standing up on end. Almost like it's got static electricity flowing through it. And you can see the light jumping down, almost like little sparks, little zaps of electricity jumping out the sky onto that polar bear. And you notice how the fur on the polar bear begins to change colour and starts to have colours cycling around, almost like a light show within the fur of that polar bear. As if somehow that polar bear is channeling the energy from the sky down into itself, and somehow storing all that within its own fur. And you watch as patterns of light move from head to tail, pulsate, spread around, and start making different patterns. Almost like there's rhythm or music playing within that polar bear. And you watch with intrigue as you then see that adult polar bear turn its nose toward the polar bear cub, reach its head forward and touch the nose of the polar bear cub. And it's almost like a spark of static electricity jumps to that polar bear cub. And the light show starts spreading through the cub, dancing around on the fur of the cub. And you take some photos, knowing that later you won't believe your eyes. You'll think back on the experience and imagine that you must have imagined it. And so you want something concrete, something you can rely on. You also want to try and understand what this is. And after a while of watching those polar bears flash with different light, watching the way the light reflects off the snow around the polar bears, the aurora begins to rise back up into the sky, appears less energetic, and goes back to normal. And yet those polar bears still have dancing light pulsating through them. And the polar bears stand up and continue walking along the hill. And you decide you're going to follow them, but you keep your distance. So you follow those polar bears as they walk down the hill. As they begin to follow a trodden trail, it looks like they've probably walked this reasonably recently before. And you keep to the tree line, and you keep your camera out. And every now and then you zoom in, get a closer look of those polar bears, take a few photos. And then you notice a white fox come running out of the trees, and suddenly get startled at recognizing that there's something out here, because it wasn't expecting you to be there. And so it freezes for a moment, and with your camera out, you quickly zoom in, get focus, nice bit of background blur, a bit of halo from the moon, and quickly take a photo, and then another and another. That even under this low light, with the fox being white and the moon being bright, you don't need too slow a shutter speed. And then that fox turns and darts back into the woods. And you continue walking along the edge of the forest, keeping an eye on those bears. As you walk past where the fox was, you can hear it walking in the forest. You know it's just keeping out of sight while you pass by, but it obviously has somewhere to be, somewhere to go. And it's just waiting for you to pass by before it continues its journey. And you notice, while following those bears, an owl in the sky, just silently hovering and flying around, just silhouetted in the sky. And you track that owl with your camera. Get a photo of the hovering owl. And you know that photography is about capturing moments that others miss. and being aware of the moment, keeping your focus open and not being so absorbed in other things that you miss what's going on right in front of you. And so you take time to capture all of the unexpected pleasures that you see, taking each opportunity. And you notice the sound of the ocean. You're aware that you're gradually getting closer to the sea. And you know that shortly the forest will take a turn in a different direction. And you'll have to continue out in the open. And you'll walk down towards the ocean. And you suspect that these polar bears are heading towards the ocean as well. And from time to time, you continue to zoom in on them with your camera. And you can see that they're still flashing and pulsating with colour. But they still look like there's static electric within them. And the ocean gets louder and louder as you get closer and closer. And those hills eventually turn into a cliff. And the polar bears find their way down from the hills, heading down to the bottom of the cliff. And you find your way down as well, keeping an eye on those polar bears. And you watch as they walk along the edge of the ocean. And you notice them turning into a cave. And you decide to head down and go and explore that cave. And so you follow those polar bears. You carefully and quietly enter the cave. And as you walk into the cave, so you notice the sounds change. How the ocean begins to sound echoey and starts to sound more distant the deeper you walk into the cave. You use your camera to illuminate your path as you walk toward where you know those polar bears are. And you can notice a glowing coming from within this cave. You can notice that colour changing glow, knowing that you're approaching those polar bears. And as you get nearer to the polar bears, so you notice this cave opens up into a chamber. And around the outside of the chamber is a glowing moss. And you touch that moss with your hand. You feel how soft that moss is. You notice it's slightly damp and yet slightly warm. And you find that unusual given the temperature outside the cave. and you wonder how that moss is keeping warm. And you can see those bears sat in the cave, huddled up together, both glowing and having pulsing colours in different patterns. And in the middle of this chamber, you see a pool of water that's glowing blue. And you carefully walk into the chamber. And something about the experience makes you feel safe around these bears. You have this sense like they've noticed you and don't care that you're there. Like they've just clocked you, got a bit of an eye on you, and trust that you're no threat to them. And they've got no intention of being any threat to you. And you walk to that water. You put your hands into the water, and you notice that that water feels warm. You notice there's a slight steam, a slight bit of water vapor coming up, where it's almost like being at a spa. You have this sense that you could climb into this pool of water, relax down into it, and you'd be so warm and comfortable. And this water's bubbling just ever so slightly. And while your hands rest in the water, you notice the blueness from the water beginning to spread up both hands, spread up your arms, almost like it's somehow spreading comfort and relaxation through your arms, through your shoulders, and then down through your body. And that somehow that relaxation is spreading deeper and deeper within you with each breath that you take. And you notice the strangest thing, that while that relaxation spreads through you, you feel this compulsion to want to sit down, close your eyes, and begin to meditate. And so after the blue light, the blue from that water has passed through your entire body, from the top of your head to the tips of your toes, you sit down against the wall of the cave, resting your back against that incredibly soft and warm moss. You close your eyes and begin to relax deeply and begin to meditate on just being in the moment, noticing drip sounds, noticing sensations of your ongoing experience. And then after a few moments, you feel like your eyes have opened, yet you know they're still closed. And you look around you, and you can see those bears looking up at you. And then one of those bears begins to talk to you. And you realize you understand it. But you notice that because of the state of mind you're in, you're just remaining mindful. You don't attach to the fact that the bear is talking and that you understand that bear. You just accept it as being in this moment. And the bear explains where you are and explains what's going on. They explain that they're not ordinary polar bears, that they're spirit animals, and that all spirit animals head up to the North Pole, and they make this journey once every year. And they reinvigorate themselves with the energy from the universe. That at the heart of every single atom, at the heart of every single wave of existence, the most fundamental thing is the seed of consciousness. And they talked about something called panpsychism. And you found yourself intrigued about this idea. And they talked about how the information is passed through the electromagnetic field, and that they've got the ability to absorb that information. And it's passed through the electromagnetic field from the universe down to clusters of galaxies, down to individual galaxies, down to planets. Following that chain from universe through galaxies, through stars, to planets, a chain of information that connects everything like a giant web throughout the universe. And that they can top themselves up with this energy, top themselves up with this information, this universal consciousness, helping them to remain spirit animals, connecting with the rest of the universe. Almost like they're opening up a channel. And they come up here, and then they find somewhere to rest, to meditate, to allow that to absorb within them. And once it's fully absorbed within them, they then go back and carry on their existence. And that some animals can't make their way up here. And in those cases, they need the stronger, larger animals to do this on their behalf, and then find these locations where they can almost project out that universal consciousness, creating a web of consciousness between receptive animals. Where certain beings, like humans, just think that the animals seem to just know each other and somehow seem in sync with each other. Then you realize there have been times when you've noticed different types of animals responding as if somehow they understood each other. You'd passed it off as unlikely, just coincidence. But now you weren't so sure. And the polar bear explained that this connection to a universal consciousness is a connection to being able to share ideas, to bypass specific language. And that's why they can be understood. Because it's not that they're communicating with a language, they're communicating in ideas. And each brain will interpret those ideas in their own way and make sense of things in their own way. And that humans are one of the few creatures which aren't spirit animals. And that humans seem to think of spirit animals as somehow being invisible, spirit-like animals, when in fact they're normal animals in your everyday life that can project a connection upon you and with each other, almost like communicating through your spirit. That it can be your pet dog that you feel this deep bond and connection with, that you feel seems to know you even when you don't say a word. Or your cat that jumps up on your bed, snuggles up and nuzzles into you, as if somehow it knew that you needed a hug or just needed that bit of attention. Or that can sometimes be sat in a corner, staring at something you can't see, where it's zoned out and it's connected with the wider universal consciousness. And that these animals have far greater consciousness and awareness than humans seem to give them credit for. That humans give themselves this heightened sense of importance that can blind them to what's right in front of their face. And you listen intently and with intrigue and interest. And then after a little while, the blue begins to fade through you. The meditation begins to come to an end. And you now have an awareness of actually opening your eyes in this cave, in this cavern. And you see those polar bears just sat there. You notice the colours are beginning to fade on their backs. The pulsing light is slowing down. And they look like they're about to fall asleep. And as they do, you leave this cavern and you walk out of the cave. And you notice as you're walking out that you walk out into a sunrise, that the ocean has calmed right down. And you can feel the warmth of the sun on your cheeks. Noticing that that warmth of the sun is warmer than the coolness of the environment. You find your way back up toward that forest. You walk back through the forest, noticing the rays of light from the sun dancing on the path as the sun shines through those trees. That slight mist as it warms up the snow. You find your way back to a cabin. And in the cabin, you take off your outerwear. You light a log fire. Make yourself a hot drink. You sit in a chair by that fire, listening to the crackling of the fire, feeling the warmth of the hot drink in your hands, occasionally putting it up just under your nose, breathing into the cup a little, feeling the warmth from in the cup, and relaxing. And while you relax, you drink your drink. And then you realize you've been out all night. And so you just want to rest for a moment. You don't know if you'll fall asleep, but you just want to rest for a moment. So you read a book for a little while, sat in that chair. Until you notice your eyes becoming heavy. And as your eyes become heavy, so you close the book, place it down beside you, and let your eyes relax shut. And with your eyes relaxed shut, so you notice yourself dreaming of seeing those polar bears. Only in the dream, the polar bears run down that hill, and as they run, so they turn into beautiful and powerful looking white horses, which launch off the hill, riding on a rainbow. And you watch as they ride on that rainbow out over the ocean. And as they seem to become whiter and brighter, the faster and further they run. And the more they're galloping, the more energy they seem to be gathering up within them. Until it looks like they're becoming denser and denser, almost like they're becoming more stocky. And then like they suddenly become elongated before disappearing in a flash, just leaving behind a trail of rainbow off as far as the eye can see. And you start wondering about this dream and its connection with your experience, and whether this is part of your mind's way of understanding the experience, of helping you to process your experiences from the day. And after what seems like a really short time, you discover yourself waking up and realize that many hours have passed by. You go outside, stretch your legs outside your cabin. You walk around to the lake by the cabin. And it's just a small lake, but you gaze out over that lake, noticing the way ice has formed across most of the lake. But some parts the ice has cracked, and you can just see the waves of the lake sloshing up against the underside of the ice and onto the shore. And you gently push on some of the ice with your feet, just one foot, applying a bit more pressure, hearing that creaking sound of the ice, and then the cracking and sloshing and sploshing sound of the ice as your foot breaks that. And you do that a few times, just stepping on the bits of ice. And you know that in the morning you'll be heading away from this cabin, making a long trip back home, that you came up here to see the northern lights, and you saw more than you expected, and you want to be able to check out your photos and try and process your experience, see if you can make sense of some of it. And while you're stood by that lake, so you notice what looks like a large stag walking out of the forest. And a bit like you did, it stands on the ice a little bit, breaks the edge of the ice, but then the stag puts its head down, has a little bit to drink. And you wished that you had your camera out on you here and now. And you know you have to just remember this moment as that stag heads back into the forest. And you head back into the cabin. And as the evening draws on, you have something to eat before heading off to bed. You relax down in the bed with the most comfortable blanket. It's almost like wrapping a cloud around you. Your head sinks into the most comfortable pillow, and you drift and float asleep. And the next morning, you wake up ready for your journey home. You get into your car, begin your journey away from the North Pole. You travel down through the white, snowy land that appears so barren, just white everywhere you look. And after many hours of driving, you begin to notice more and more greenery. You become aware of the rise in the temperature. You begin to notice fast flowing rivers, waterfalls, and on the quiet roads, you take time to look out the windows, drive at a comfortable speed while observing the world around you, occasionally stopping, taking some photos, stretching your legs before continuing your journey. And after most of the day, as nighttime sets in, you pull in at a place to stay. You spend the night. While you sleep, so you start to hear a storm gathering up outside. You hear the distant, low rumble of thunder, noticing that help you drift deeper into your dreams, noticing the occasional comfortable flash of light outside, hearing the sound of the rain on the window, sometimes raining hard, sometimes raining a bit softer, just drifting deeper to the sound of that rain. And the next morning, awakening to some sounds of birds outside. And when you wake up, you open the window, you smell that early morning air from a night of heavy rain. You can smell that storm on the air and see the clear blue sky of the morning. You can gaze around and see whether there's any clouds in that clear blue sky. And you have some breakfast before continuing your journey. You get back into your car, continue driving along, hearing the sound of the tyres against the wet road. Looking forward to making it all the way home. And on your journey, every time you see animals, you wonder whether they're spirit animals, whether they have a connection, whether you've just missed it all this time. And you continue driving, and around you, things continue, and around you, things continue to get greener, more lush. The air continues to get warmer. and where you are surrounded by valleys and mountains and hills. Now you're approaching an area of flat land, of fields, and you drive through bright yellow fields with the sweetest smell. And then through deep purple fields with their lavender smell. You drive through fields of corn. You drive through a vineyard. You can smell a distant smell of wine being produced. And you pull up to stretch your legs and go for a walk through an orchard. You walk among the trees. You notice some flowers around the outside. Notice some areas that have been allowed to be wild. They're kind of like wild managed areas to encourage bees and other insects and birds to the areas. You notice the daisies in the grass and the dandelions. And you carefully pick one of the grey dandelions, noticing the white oozing out of the bottom of the dandelion. You hold it up towards the sun. You twist it slowly and slightly in your fingers, noticing the way the sunlight dances through that dandelion, the way it reflects and illuminates different parts of its structure. And then you carefully blow the top of that dandelion, just as a breeze is passing by, watching that dandelion spread out from in front of you, knowing that you helped to spread life. And you continue to walk and explore, to enjoy this wildlife, noticing bees on plants, hearing the sounds of birds, seeing a couple of larger birds just circling overhead, catching warm updrafts of air. Seeing a cat that seems to be playing and jumping and pouncing on what you can't see. And so you watch that cat for a little while. You watch it wiggle its bum before leaping. You watch the way its shoulders bob up and down while keeping its body perfectly level with the ground and stretched out, while it seems to be stalking something. But you can't see what it's stalking. And you wonder whether it's just practicing, like a person will practice when they want to learn a task. And then, as if the cat just suddenly lost interest, you see it totally change in its attitude, in its movements, and just come plodding over towards you. And it wraps itself around your legs, through your legs, purring. And you crouch down, you stroke the side of that cat. It turns itself around your hand. It seems to decide to lose its ability to walk and just lifts its leg up and then flops down on its side and lets you stroke its belly and grabs onto your hand with its paws without letting out its claws. And you sit yourself down fully on the ground and it climbs onto your lap. And you didn't take much persuading not to move. And you think to yourself, well, I can't really go and do anything now, can I? I may as well stay here for a while. And you feel that this cat is telling you to slow things down and to focus on just being in the moment. There's no hurry to be somewhere else. And you start thinking about how, as a child, all you want to do is grow up, be an adult. And yet, when you become an adult, you often wish that you could be younger again. And the older you get, often the younger you wish you could be. You wish you could be a young adult, perhaps even as young as a child. And yet, when you were younger, you were doing everything you could to try and look older and trying to be older. And you start thinking that this cat is almost teaching you that you don't want to wish your life away. You want to enjoy where you're at. Enjoy stroking that cat. Enjoy just this moment, this connection. And then you hear some sounds coming from by a little barn. And as those sounds appear, so the cat jumps off your lap and starts rushing towards the barn. And the cat seems to stop, look back at you, as if to say to follow. So you follow that cat, and it keeps stopping and looking back to make sure you're still following. And then it walks into the barn. You follow into the barn, and you see a bed containing a litter of puppies. And the cat goes over and is tending to those puppies. It picks some of them up and puts them back at the bed. It seems to be very motherly with the puppies. And then you see a dog walking in, and the cat and the dog seem to be working so well together, looking after those puppies. You wonder what their relationship is. It looks like perhaps they've both grown up on this area together for a long time. They're almost like best friends. And after all those puppies are calmed down, and the dog has fed those puppies, and the cat has helped to feed those puppies by bringing some food over, that dog and cat chase each other around and seem to be playing games with each other. And the cat would go and hide behind things. And it looked like they were playing tag, as if somehow one had to catch the other. And the dog would try and figure out how to get around objects, how to get over or under objects. The dog was so much larger than the cat, so the cat could get into spaces where the dog would have to work out the puzzle of how do you get to the cat. And it looked like they had so much fun. In the same way that you can have fun watching them, seeing their relationship, aware of how different they are, aware of the different lifestyles of dogs and cats, and yet here are two who are getting on with each other and enjoying each other's company, and yet at other times probably have their own interests and go and do their own thing. And while you're just silently sitting there watching, enjoying being in the company of these animals, you notice a fox walking into this barn just as the cat and the dog are jumping on hay, bounding around. And you wonder whether the dog and the cat know the fox, whether out here in this area, in the orchard or this countryside around here, they just all get on with each other. And the cat jumps up and sits on the fox's face, wrapping its paws around the fox's head. And the fox submissively lowers its head down to the ground. And the cat gets off. And then the fox and the cat nuzzle their heads against each other. The fox rolls onto its back. The cat jumps onto its belly. Then the dog joins in and three of them play. And then after a while, someone else turns up, a farmer or someone who tends to this area. And they see you sitting and watching and they smile at you. And they engage in conversation about how you seem to be enjoying what you're watching, as if this isn't something you see every day. And they said that they're often working, but when they're not working, they'll sit outside, they'll drink a drink, and they'll just watch the animals interact and play. But it's almost as if they all know each other. They'll know each other's habits, routines, what each other like. And this person said that there's many wild animals that visit this area and they all get on with the pets, and that the dog and the cat have been friends for years. That when one or the other has children, the other one helps out with the raising of those children before those children get adopted and passed on to good homes, and that the children make great pets because the cats that get adopted get on well with dogs in adopted families, and the dogs that get adopted get on well with cats in families, and they all get on well with other animals. And you're invited in to come and have a drink, to explore the home of this person. And a part of you likes being curious and nosy and seeing how others live. So you head inside and they show the almost like memory foam, incredibly soft, jelly bean shaped pillow that the cat sleeps on as a bed. They show where the dog sleeps. And you think to yourself that the dog seems to sleep in a more comfortable looking bed than you do. And you admire the rustic wooden beams in this property, the plates that seem to be just up for decoration, brass objects hanging around the walls, paintings on the walls. And as you walk through the property and out the other side of the property, you notice there's a back garden to this property. There's a proper garden that you had imagined that perhaps there would be an orchard surrounding the whole property, and that this property was just in the middle of an orchard. But they've given themselves an area that's a proper back garden with a hedge around the outside, a couple of trees in the garden, and a pond in the garden. And they ask you if you'd like a cool drink, and the two of you sit down by the pond. And they talk to you, and you talk to them. You share something of your journey. You don't tell them about the psychedelic polar bears because you don't know how they would take that and what they would think of it. or about the fact that you heard the polar bears speak to you, but you tell them about your photography, about seeing the northern lights, about taking photos of different animals. And they listen intently and with curiosity, while you're both not looking at each other but gazing out at the garden, watching butterflies flying from plant to plant, watching frogs near the pond, being still, just moving their chins, before suddenly leaping, sometimes landing in the water, sometimes landing somewhere else, noticing the water boatman skimming on the surface of the water, and smelling that fresh country air and feeling the breeze, and being aware of the moment, aware that you're only aware of the moment in the moment. And while you sit there, you hear a noise behind you, and then notice the cat has come out to join you. And they don't know which person's lap to jump up on. They look at both of you, and you have this sense almost like they don't want to disappoint someone. So it walks under the table. There's a little bit of shade, with just some sunlight shining down through the holes in the top of the table. Making some dappled light below the table. And they turn themselves around, rest themselves down, resting their cheek on their paws, closing their eyes and drifting asleep. You can see their stomach moving in and out as they breathe. And the two of you carry on talking for a while you drink your drinks and enjoy the warmth of the sun. Enjoy the view over this garden. And you know that when you get home, it's in a city. It's looking at four walls. And when you go outside, you're surrounded by walls and roads. So you want to savor this experience. And you end up realizing you've been there so long that the sun is beginning to set again. So you say that you really should carry on with your journey, because you're probably going to have to find somewhere to stay for a night now, as it's got late. And they tell you that you can stay there for the night. And you say you don't want to impose. And they tell you that they insist. And as they say that, you notice the cat looking up, and you swear that you see a little smile on its face before it rests its cheek back down again. And so you head inside. They prepare you some food. You have a bit more conversation during the evening. And after the sun has set, you sit outside hearing the evening, nighttime sounds, sounds of crickets, feeling the cool breeze of the night, seeing the moon and the stars in the sky, sitting out on a porch-like area. And you notice your chairs are comfortable, rocking chair. It just seems to rock very gently and slightly. So while you're talking and listening, you find yourself just gently rocking. And you feel like you're going to rock yourself to sleep if you're not careful. And so you rock for a while before saying that you really should take yourself up to bed. And you head up to the room they've prepared for you. You spend that night. And the next day, you wake up feeling like you've had such a wonderful night's sleep, feeling so refreshed, revitalized. You head downstairs, hearing some noise. You find they've made you the most wonderful breakfast. And you notice that there's a child there as well. And they say that it's their niece who's come to visit. And over breakfast, the niece is messing around with some makeup. And you get told that they'd received this little makeup set as a birthday gift. And the niece says that they're not very good at doing their own makeup. They prefer doing makeup on their dolls and on their teddies. And then they say, would you let them do the makeup on you? And because you think this will make them happy, you think it could be fun, you let them do your makeup. And you see their smile. You see the way their eyes smile at you as you allow them to plaster makeup over your face. And there's no mirror in front of you. And you have this mental image that you probably look like a clown. But all you can see is the smile on their face, the memories you're helping them form. And after they've done your makeup, they show you a little mirror. And you realize you were right in what you were thinking the makeup was going to look like. And you smile and you say that they've done a great job. And they say, will you wear it for the rest of the day? And you think to yourself that normally you're quite sensible. But it could be interesting to create experiences that make others happy and laugh. And so you decide to say, yes, I'll keep this makeup on all day, knowing that it'll be interesting to see if anyone comments on it, knowing that it might make others smile or laugh and bring happiness to others. And you thank your hosts for letting you stay, for the food, for the conversation. You agree you're likely to keep in touch, that you'd love to visit here again. And you head back out to your car. And as you do, you see that cat, dog, and fox standing back there looking over at you. And you get in your car and you continue your journey home. And while you continue your journey home, from time to time, you catch a glimpse of yourself in your mirror. And it makes you smile each time you see the way that makeup was applied. And on arrival home, you park up the car. You head into your home. And as you walk up some steps to your front door, you see a little ladybird walking on the wall by the steps. You notice that contrast between that one ladybird and a street full of bricks and concrete. And it gets you thinking about being back out in nature again and about your next journey you look forward to. And you let yourself in and you go into your home, you change into the most comfortable pajamas. You put on slippers that are incredibly fluffy on the inside. You wrap a dressing gown around you. You make yourself a drink. You sit down and drink that drink. And later on, you suddenly remember you've got the makeup on your face. You've had a long few days. So you go and have a warm shower. You wash that makeup off. Finding yourself ready now to go to bed, to settle down. So you sit in bed, reading a book, listening to some soft music, helping you relax while resting there. Noticing the way a saxophone in the music is being played and somehow seems to reverberate through you. Almost like it's falling into sync with your rhythms, or you're falling into sync with its rhythms. Either way you notice, it's helping you relax deeper. You notice with some of the lower notes, your eyes just want to shut and drift deeper into the experience. And so you put that book down. You turn off the light. And you drift and float comfortably asleep. And while you drift and float comfortably asleep, finally home from your experience, you drift into pondering about the meaning of it, wondering about whether animals really are all connected, whether the universe is really made up of consciousness that just needs to be in a form that can be self-aware. And you find your mind floating to these thoughts and ideas, and drifting and dreaming about the relationship between the animals that you've met on your journey, and the connection those animals seem to have had with you since you've been up and met with those polar bears. And while you drift asleep, so you begin to dream of walking on the most beautiful sandy beach with that sea rolling in, with some spray of sea foam, and you see a polar bear walking towards you in this dream, and you find yourself eating strawberries while you're walking towards it. And the two of you stop, and that polar bear stands up. You suddenly become aware of how tall a polar bear is when it's on its back legs in front of you. And then, in a deep voice, the polar bear talks to you about how you've got this connection now because you went in that cave. You put your hands in that water, and the polar bear tells you to hold your hands out in a receiving position, almost like a cup. And you do this. Then you notice twinkling and sparkling of light as something forms between your hands. And then you notice and discover an amethyst appearing in your palms as that light fades away. Yet it seems to still maintain a slight glow, as if it partly seems to give off some light, rather than just reflect light. And the polar bear tells you to always keep this on you, that you can make a chain, you can attach it to the chain, keep it around your neck, and it'll allow you to hear the thoughts of animals, and how you hear those thoughts of animals will depend on how absorbed in the process you get and how accepting you are of the experience. That it'll allow you to channel your thinking and their thinking. And it could be that you just notice and have a sense, or it could be that you hear words, or hear that communication, or experience the communication in some other way. And you continue sleeping through the night. The next morning, waking up, noticing beside you is that amethyst just sitting next to your light. And you know that was more than a dream. You know it was deeper than a dream. And for the next few days, you go out and about. You lead your life, but you find yourself being more present, more focused on the here and now, being more mindful when you see birds in the sky, butterflies in plants, bees darting from place to place, when you see dogs and cats, when you travel out of the city and see other animals out in nature. Suddenly you find yourself being more mindful and connected and present with everything, and find that impacting on your mood, on how you enjoy life, and what you get out of life, and how you treat those things around you. And one night you just drift asleep. You dream of all these connections. You find that your mind is beginning to really deeply understand all this, as if you're dreaming outside the universe in a way that you couldn't even put into words, that can only be experienced. And you find yourself drifting into the deepest, most profound, healing, relaxing sleep that you've ever experienced, drifting and floating so deeply, so profoundly asleep.